President Lai of Taiwan gave an interview during the weekend, and what he said went viral on Chinese social media. And basically, every Chinese geopolitical channel picked it up and is talking about it right now. So I want to use this opportunity to introduce to you guys one of the biggest Chinese geopolitical commentator here on YouTube. His name is Stone. Actually, I have no idea what his name is, but his channel's name is Stone. And he just released a video insisting that the unification war of Taiwan will start this year. In fact, he made this prediction 2 years ago and constantly remind his audience that he's still holding on to that prediction. You know how there's many clickbait videos on YouTube and they predict this kind of China is going to collapse at the end of this year, and that was 3 years ago. And usually what happened is that when the deadline is close, the host or the commentator will kind of shy away if nothing really happened. But this guy, Stone, is different. He keep reminding his audience, about, well, he's still holding on to his prediction. So I'm going to divide this video into 3 sections. The first one, I'm going to give you a brief introduction to Mr. Stone and his channel. And then I'm going to give you a short video translation of what President Lai said during his interview last weekend. And finally, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Stone, and he will explain his logic as to why China or Xi might make a move by the end of this year on Taiwan. So timestamp down below, you guys can jump forward if you want. Let's go. Okay, a quick rundown of who this guy is. He was from China, currently living here in the United States. I believe in Las Vegas, but correct me if I'm wrong. I think there are Chinese people who watch his channel here. That's also on my channel. His channel is 6 years old, close to 8,000 video posts. Very hardworking guy. He also has 450,000 subscribers, so that's probably more than many channels you guys follow. And that's pretty impressive considering his channel faces Chinese audience only, and Chinese in China need a VPN in order to watch his content here on YouTube, right? When he first left China and started this YouTube channel in US, he was very not anti-China, but anti-PRC, anti-Chinese government. And he always complained about how bad the Chinese policy is domestically, and also there are media oppression and the government is not heading towards the right direction. And he also kind of expect this rosy picture about living abroad in US or in Europe, probably from some Hollywood movie or something like that. But after living in United States for a few years and run this channel, right? He found out that the United States domestic politics is even more dirtier than China. So he started to become more neutral on his channel. He still criticized the Chinese government from time to time, but he also criticized the US government, for example, and policy. So I would say right now his channel is much more balanced compared to what he claimed to be. He used to be only, bashing the Chinese government. From my current network, I can consider he is the biggest, actually, the Chinese geopolitical commentator here on YouTube. Much bigger than the other Chinese I introduced on this channel. So, for example, Professor Jin only has 70,000 subscribers, so he has 7 times more. The ones that are bigger than him, there are a few, but there are channels from, for example, Taiwan that is kind of neutral pro-China. But yes, they have over 1 million subscribers, but they have like a rotating host and guest, so that doesn't count. For his channel, it's just him. He doesn't even invite any guests onto his show. And also there are a few big individuals, Chinese, who have their channel in Canada or here in US. But I won't even consider them to be geopolitical channels, because what they do is they only talk shit about China. Like 2,000 videos and every single video is about how bad China is, how bad China is. And for me, there's like a minimum requirement for me to consider a channel to be geopolitical. You have to be inclusive and be able to look at different places in the world and give your thoughts on it. And if you only condemn just one side and talk about only one thing, then I consider you not to be worthy for me to look into and all that. So for my Mandarin speaking audience who haven't visited his channel before, I recommend it because all the Chinese guests I introduce in my channel, they all have this Chineseness that I do not have. I left China when I was 6-year-old and I spent most of my time in Hong Kong and here in California. So no matter how hard I try, I cannot fully duplicate that kind of Chinese mentality that they carries. So he's one of those channels that he carry a very original Chinese mindset, okay? Because he's in the US now, that makes him even more special. And from my perspective, he's right now quite neutral, balanced, and inclusive. Although we often come to different conclusions on different geopolitical matters. So go to his channel. I think it's worth your time. Now, enough about Mr. Song. Let's see what President Lai said in that interview during the weekend. Here we go. Everybody need to understand, China wants to swallow Taiwan, not because it wants to protect its territorial integrity. If it is really because of territorial integrity, why China do not ask Russia for the lost territory during Qing Dynasty? Today's Russia is at its weakest moment. If China is not doing that, then its unification demand over Taiwan is not for the territorial integrity of China. So why does China want to invade Taiwan? It is because China wants to challenge and change the rule-based international order. It wants to establish hegemony over the Western Pacific. Sound like he's reading a script sending right out of the White House. Okay, let's continue. We need to diversify our investment away from China to other countries in the region. We need to massively build up our military capability and increase our military spending budget. And most importantly, we need to stand with the global democracy camp. We need to demonstrate strength in numbers. We need everyone around the world to understand that the problem between China and Taiwan is also the problem of the entire Asia and the entire world. You see our friend, the United States, they have formed many democratic alliances. This including Quad, AUKUS, and the Five Eyes. There are many new alliances forming as we speak. This is a sign that democratic nations are united together to face the challenge ahead of us. That's why I keep telling people, we need to have faith. We need to show the world that we are determined to protect our country and our sovereignty and maintain the peace between China and Taiwan. Well, that's not the entire interview, but most discussed part of the Chinese. Now, that's not the entire interview, but the most discussed part on the Chinese social media. Now, on to the core content of today. Let's see what Mr. Song says about the interview and his prediction. Again, I'm only taking a small portion out of his entire video, okay? His entire video is over 30 minutes long. Let's see what he says here. It is a waste of time to follow President Lai's logic. And whoever go down that rabbit hole has low intelligence. Let me give you guys some examples. Remember a few months ago, there are all these talks about the petrodollar ending. Saudi Arabia is not renewing some contract with the United States. And there are all those conspiracy theory of which president signed this secret agreement with the king of Saudi Arabia. And there are all kinds of debate going on regarding how valid this agreement is and so on. The people who waste time trying to figure those things out are really amateurs of geopolitics. I have said it many times in my channel that the international order is an order without government, without hierarchy power. What maintains this so-called petrodollar is not any particular contract or agreement. The core element is the army and the military might of the United States in the region. So don't waste my time talking about things like whether Palestinian state really exists or should exist and so on. And do not waste your own time trying to figure out all the conversation of the past. If there's any agreement between the Israel and the Palestinian and who dishonored the agreement first. Those are all completely waste of time. The core of the problem when it comes to Palestine and Israel is a military one. If Palestinian and its allies can defeat the Israeli and their allies, we won't be talking about these problems today. There won't be a problem. Same thing goes with the Ukrainian problem and potential problems between China and Russia. It's about power and balance of that power. If China is strong enough to unify Taiwan back in the 1960s, we won't have a problem today. The reason we couldn't do it back then was because the United States parked its 7th Fleet there, and its strength was too much for China to handle. It is like all those talks about Song Dynasty of China, how advanced and civilized the culture was, how at that time the Mongolian were backward and barbaric and primitive. I ask you, so what? The Mongolian army chased the Chinese Song emperor all the way to a cliff, and the emperor jumped off that cliff. All those talks about righteous and justice, they are all meaningless. If your nation cannot even survive, and survival is based on the combined military might of you and your allies. I like President Lai. He's a very smart guy. He's very cunning in leading audience into a trap that many Chinese willingly jump into. If today's China is much more powerful than the US, why would we be even talking about something like petrodollar? It will be gone, and we might be talking about petro renminbi. Palestinian problem. The side who gets to outgun the other side, gets to decide the end result. If Russia falls too far behind China in terms of relative strength, those territories will be redistributed again in the future. That's the universal law of geopolitics. So do not waste time on those treaties. Might makes right. The goal of President Lai's statements is to make the Taiwan issue a global issue, to make sure people think it is no longer a China domestic issue. What President Lai is trying to say is that, hey, everyone, you see, a democracy is under threat. If you don't help me out, China will soon be threatening other democracy, including yours. This is a copy of the Washington narrative that the US is trying to sell to the world about Taiwan issue. I mean, look at the crude oil trade in the Middle East. That oil needs to be traded in USD. Back then, when China is weak, it accepts that rule. Now China is strong. It does not accept that rule. The rule exists to begin with, was because US relative strength and might in the region. Now that might is weakening. Same with Taiwan. US could prevent the unification back then because US was too strong compared to China. Now the US no longer has the capability. It needs to retreat from that position. Back then, when US 7th Fleet was in the region, the unification was basically impossible. But now, if you place the fleet there again, Chinese military might in the region is so strong that it can basically ignore the US 7th Fleet. That's what President Lai and the US is doing, because both understand that they are outgunned militarily by China in the region, and they need to rally more allies. What Xi doing is exactly the opposite, of course. To tell the world that Taiwan issue is an internal issue, a domestic problem of China, not an international one. From my point of view, the United States can no longer stop China from unifying with Taiwan. However, the United States might still want to provoke China to attack either Philippines or Taiwan because it wants to use this as an excuse to sanction, if not fully remove China from the international monetary system, and hope it can slow China's growth. So to China, the current calculation is whether China is willing to bear the consequence of impact on the economic front. Now, on to the revelation part, the prediction he made, okay? I told all my audience 2 years ago that China will make a move on Taiwan before the end of 2024. Back then, we didn't even know who's going to be president of Taiwan. But my logic back then was that Xi Jinping is getting too old. The problem of Taiwan needs to be solved before he gets any older. Xi Jinping is already 71 years old this year. If Xi Jinping was younger, if he was in his 50s, he would have waited longer maybe. Xi Jinping will eventually make the move. It's a certainty. So it doesn't really matter who's in power in Taiwan. As long as he or she does not make concrete move towards peaceful unification, military unification will always happen. The difference is only President Lai will likely to resist much stronger compared to the other two candidates who lost the election. The other two presidential candidates will not blow up the Three Gorges Dam or TSMC because President Lai is a puppet of the US and he might sabotage and flee to the United States. Oh, also, he believes that the presidential election this year, the transition of power might not be so smooth, and that will make US very vulnerable and unable to effectively back Taiwan. So that is behind his logic. Okay, let me give you guys my take on this, okay? First of all, regarding this Russia land that's supposed to be Chinese, there's a lot of Western media picked up on this as well. There's writers who says here if China wants Taiwan, it should also take back land from Russia. That's what President Lai said. And then also channels like Russia Today also picked this up. My take is this. There's currently no territorial dispute between China and Russia. The border is fixed. The problem has been fixed for decades. Now, will there be a change in border between Russia and China in the future? That's not entirely impossible. Border itself is artificial. For example, if let's say Russia got color revolutioned by United States and Russia becomes a US proxy on the northern border of China and start to have this kind of proxy war, well, maybe when that conflict happens and when that conflict ends, the border will change. The same thing if, China fracture and break apart and the northern province of China become US proxy against Russia, and we have this Chinese Zelensky backed by US regime and cling to have ownership of land to Russia, that will change the border as well. I mean, never say never to anything, but the current Chinese government and Russia government, there's no dispute at all regarding border, so I don't see that happening at the moment. Oh, one more thing. When he keep repeating this might makes right and using the petrodollar and Palestine, Israel as an example, I believe he underestimated the complexity of the problem in the Middle East and also overestimated the pure military might and what it can do. And this is also one reason that I did not really go into the Middle East topic yet, because I find that many Chinese geopolitical channels are unfamiliar with that region and they don't talk about it that much. And when they do, their analysis is rather shallow most of the time. But eventually, yeah, I have to go into those topics and put together a video. Now, regarding Taiwan, I made a video 3 months ago talking about a potential unification war on Taiwan beginning in the coming years. I will put the link at the end of this video. My prediction came from other factors, not exactly about Xi Jinping's age. That to me, it wasn't really that huge of a factor. And I know that many of my audience do not want to see a war happening, including myself, okay? I don't want to see war or people dying. But sometimes when we draw predictions and analysis, we need to put aside our hopes and wishes and look at the reality. How I came to the prediction of the war will eventually take place is because of three factors, okay? Taiwan, from this point onward, according to, according to basically all geopolitical analysts and enthusiasts at the moment, will never accept peaceful unification. That's Taiwan's position moving onward from now. That's almost universally accepted by almost all the politicians and intellectuals in China right now. The second factor, okay? The chance of China letting go of Taiwan to allow it to become an independent state, given the strength of today's China, that is also close to zero. No matter if it was Xi Jinping in power or someone else. Because, don't tell me, oh, if Deng Xiaoping was in power, he would act, otherwise. No. During the negotiation back in, I believe, 1984, for the return of Hong Kong, that was when the Prime Minister of UK, Margaret Thatcher, came to China and, negotiate. And initially, he explored the possibility to see if he can extend the rent on Hong Kong for another 50 or 100 years. Deng Xiaoping was firmly in his position to, get Hong Kong back to China, and Deng even exposed the willingness to go to war with UK if UK insists on, forcing some kind of extension. And my third point is that, and also one of the most important point to me, is that US really want to get China into a war in order to swing the confiscation and sanction trap on China. And it is willing to push very far on either Philippines or Taiwan or both to make that happen. So that's my case, that I can really see something happening in the coming years. According to my prediction, what did I say? Like 30% chance that it will happen this year. This guy said that it will happen, for sure, according to him. And he keep reminding all his audience that, if it doesn't happen, he will, open a podcast and apologize to anyone. I guess it's okay to, maybe even to give these guys a little bit leeway, because, the Chinese New Year is in January or February. I don't know, about 2025. So, so what he's saying that it's going to happen within 4 to 6 months, basically. Let's see. And also, I get this question a lot about this obsession of China on the territorial integrity of Taiwan, and something that Chinese is willing to go to war. And that seems to be very bizarre to some of my foreigner friends who are even pro-China and think that China will always remain peaceful. Well, if you ask me that question, I can't really tell you, because I don't have that kind of perception. That's why I keep telling other people that I'm not Chinese or authentic enough really to answer that kind of question. If I have that kind of obsession, I would try to dig into my subconscious to, really figure out why I think it that way. But I don't really care about Taiwan going independent or not from a personal level, but definitely geopolitically speaking, I think it is best for Taiwan to have a peaceful unification with China, or at least set like a goal. Like, let's do that in 10 and to 20 years, for example, and we make different steps to aim towards that direction. If it really insists on going independence, yeah, I can really see some kind of military action coming in the future months and years. So be ready for that. And finally, all the guests that I introduced to this channel, the Chinese guests, Professor Zhang, Professor Jin, Professor Shen, for example, almost all of them, they have openly stated that in their channel, in their video, that Taiwan will not have another presidential election. And the next Taiwan presidential election is supposed to be in 2028. So, yes, let's see what happens. Please like and subscribe. Richard signing out.